What's up everyone, this is Andre Sora and welcome to this in-depth look at PLAYBEAT 3 by Audiomodern. And PLAYBEAT is a creative groove randomizer that helps you create infinite variations of grooves, and obviously that is maintaining a sense of creativity, inspiration, and momentum. You don't want to get stuck in just doing the same patterns over and over again, and by just pressing a few buttons you get to a point where the original beat is just unrecognizable, but in a very good way. And you can create nearly infinite combinations of beats, and no two grooves will ever be alike. What I want to do in this video is go through all of its basic functions and explain what they do and how to use them. Let's start off with a sort of top-down perspective. It is a complicated plugin, but the thing is, once you get the hang of some key controls, everything else will fall into place. On top of the plugin, you have the logo and the I button here. The info button shows you a bit of info about who made the plugin, about the company, and also some useful tabs to get the manual, support, go to the website, the forum, and so on. So it's quite nifty to have all of this stuff here on the interface. You can sync or unsync the plugin to the tempo of your DAW. In this case, it's Reaper, and keep that in mind because it is going to be important later for MIDI routing. And then you have this here, which is quite powerful. You have the presets and packs, the sound packs, and you can load, you can save some, we'll get to that a bit later, and you can also scroll presets like that. As you can see, it goes through different sounds, but I'm just going to keep it on 0 state, then undo and redo. You have the MIDI learn page here, so you can assign all of this to whatever controller you have. Really cool MIDI mapping. You have the settings, and we'll get back to this a bit later, as I mentioned, with the in-out section and the MIDI. And then you have the resize button here, but the good thing about this plugin and all of Audiomodern stuff is that it's vector based, so you can make it as big or as small as you want. That covers the very top of the plugin. Then we get into the meat of things. Here we have so many options here to work with, and let's take it one at a time. The first thing you see here top left is the mixer button, and you have the 8 individual channels. You can modify the volume of each of these channels. If you double click, it's going to reset. You can solo, mute, and then you also have a master, so that's quite useful. You can also reset everything like that. Then we have either a 16 grid or a 32 note grid. If you want longer, more varied patterns, you'll probably switch to 32. And one amazing thing that this has, which a lot of competitors don't include for some reason, is this region select function. And this is actually quite useful if, for instance, you're not working in the 4/4 track, you're in 3/4. And now you have a sort of waltz in a sequencer that's designed in grids of 4, so to speak. The next button here is a remix pad and a sample trigger. I'm gonna get back to this a bit later. So I'm actually gonna jump now to the biggest part of this plugin, which is the grid itself. And let's start adding some samples. And you have 8 different channels. You have an all button to select everything, or you can just go one by one like this. And let's say on track number 1, I want a kick. I can click here. I have kick. I'm just gonna go for the first one. I can drag it like this, and I'm just gonna add it here and maybe here. Let's see how that sounds. That's all fine and dandy. And then next to it, we have a sample edit, which is quite powerful. You have a fade in, you have a fade out, and of course you can also trim the sample. So if this is too long, because you do have a bit of a boom towards the end of it, and you can actually kind of see it here on the waveform. You have the nifty preview button here. You can maybe opt for a bit of a fade out, and then something like this to just have a super short kick. If, for instance, you want to go the other route and sort of have if you have an 808 sound that you like the tail end of, but you don't like the click, the attack, you can get rid of that and maybe fade it in a bit. That's extremely powerful, and clicking the reset button, lo and behold, resets the whole thing. Then this is quite interesting. You have the quantization, and this can be either on all of them, set to 116 or 1.8 or whatever, or you can have each individual track playing at a different quantization. So for instance, let's say I have some snares here, and I'm gonna go here, right snare, probably, I don't know, randomly this one. Let's see what that sounds like. That sounds pretty cool, but you can also do this on this track. So instant halftime. But for now, I'm going to keep this on 116 to just groove with the kick. Then you have a shift function that literally shifts everything by one step, and you can go to all. Maybe you want to try a bit of a different pattern. You can easily do that. And next to it, we have a shuffle button, and this can be applied to all of them or just to an individual track. So let's say I want a hi-hat. I'm going to add it on 3 here. Let's say I want it on everything, and hat. Go over this one, just basic. Sounds good, but maybe let's add a bit of a shuffle to it. That sounds pretty cool. Then if you go down this side of the plugin, you can delete a row completely. I'm not going to do that because I like that beat. And next to that, we have a log button that locks all of this. And once we get into the randomizing function of PLAYBEAT, this will make a bit more sense. Then we have a copy paste function. So let's say I want some different kick, maybe on say track 4. I'm going to go here, track 4, search for a different kick. And let's say this one. And I'm gonna go to mixer, maybe lower track 4 a bit, and possibly even kind of add a hidden hit somewhere here. So you can do that. If you don't like it, you can just erase the whole thing. Now, some of the most powerful tools in PLAYBEAT are these effects tabs. So you have steps, which is the page we've been looking at so far. And next one is density. So how many notes you have on each of these. So let's say maybe I want to give it a bit of a trap tinge. So I'm going to raise this to like 3. Let's see what that sounds like. So just to remind you, that's the hi-hat. And let's solo the hi-hat. Okay, and maybe let's go more extreme on this one. And let's hear it in the track. And let's hear how that beat would sound like without the hi-hat. Then the next one is pitch. So each of these can have a different pitch. For now, I'm going to manually change values, and then I'll show you how to randomize these. Let's just do a bit of this to get it sounding a bit more interesting. And let's solo the hi-hat to see what's happening. It just makes everything sound a bit more interesting because now you have a bit of a different density on some of these hits, and you also have a different pitch on some of them as well. We can also add a flam, and as opposed to the number of hits that we had in the density. This is actually in milliseconds, and it can go from 0 to 120. So let's say we want a bit of a flam on the second snare hit, let's say like 40 something milliseconds. For this one, that might sound a bit extreme. Let's go a bit lower. Love that. It just brings a bit of an extra something on that second hit, just because you can kind of almost hear two hits. Then next one is volume, and this one does what it says on the can. It literally just tells you what volume each of these individual hits has. So let's say we want to maybe have another hit here. We go back to step. I want to try something different on the snare. So we're going to do this. Let's see what that sounds like. Still a bit too loud. Let's try a bit lower. And actually, for what I have in store for this, I'm going to add another one, go back to volume, and lower this one even more, like 20. And then do something similar with a hi-hat, just to, again, make it a bit more human-like. And I'm randomizing these manually, but you'll see how easy and fun it is to do it with the randomizing algorithm. And let's say this one, we can go even higher than 100, something like that. Love that. We're gonna go now to pan, and now again this one does what it says on the can. And let's try something interesting with these snare hits. I'm gonna kind of almost add a bit of a delay, like a ping pong effect on that snare hit, so it's gonna go left and right. And each of these, if you remember, has a bit of a different volume and considerably lower than the original hit, so it's gonna sound pretty cool. Maybe that's a bit too extreme, so let's go kind of halfway. Love that. And then we could kind of do the same with the hi-hat, a bit on the left, a bit on the right, and alternating them, just so we get a bit of a interesting spatial effect out of that groove. Then we get into some of the more macro randomization features. So before we get into what this big button here does, you have this button here that literally resets everything. We're not going to do that. We're going to hit back. And then you have this one that locks a specific tab here. So for instance, if we want to randomize something, but we want the steps to be maintained, we can do that. And then it just randomizes the density. And this big button here is the randomizing button, the big randomizing button. And we can click here. You see it changed everything here. The pitch, the flam, there's no flam left, but the steps are the same. I'm going to hit back just because I like what I did with those individual effects. And for now, I'm going to keep everything unlocked. And the big button randomizes literally everything. So it's a really powerful tool. Make sure you don't accidentally press it, although you do have the undo button. Then in terms of randomizing, it all depends also on whether or not this button is enabled or if you only want one of these to be randomized. So for instance, if I click here and press the randomize button, everything gets randomized. But if I only want the kick to be randomized, it just does that. At the same time, you need to be mindful of the fact that this button controls all of the different effects. So if you really like a pattern, let's say in the pitch, you need to click that one. And when it randomizes, it randomizes everything but the pitch. Then moving back down to the effects, what we have here is a way of telling the randomizing button what the range of that randomization should be. So for instance, if on the kick I have 3 hits, and I like the idea of having just 3 hits when it comes to that kick drum, I can select fixed, I can move it to there, and then when I hit randomize, it's only going to add 3. You can always move to this, so you can put up to 16, and then when you randomize, it's going to be between, in this case, 3 and 14. So these can vary wildly, and it kind of depends on which of these you want to have more control over the number of randomizing elements. So maybe for a hi-hat, you would probably go higher, just have a maximum of 16 and then play around with that. But obviously for a kick, or especially for a snare, you might not want that many hits. The button next to it, which is common to all of these effects, is the lock. And this button lets you lock certain elements of your beat. Let's say I really like the kick, I'm gonna do this. And maybe I really like the snare, I'm gonna do this. And then if I hit random, it's gonna randomize things, but it's gonna keep the ones that I locked in place. And you can reset the lock from there. And then the reset button literally resets everything. And again, this is something you can click on in any of these tabs. And on each of these modules, you see these dice like elements here, and this is the randomizing button for that specific element. So let's use it to make something interesting for the hi-hat. This shows you the number of steps it's gonna apply the density function to. So it's on 4. If I click here, it only assigns it to 4 of these. You can have it as a range, so between 3 and let's say 8. And if I click randomize, some of these 3, 4, 6, it's going to apply different values of that density. We're going to go to pitch, and we have the same type of options. You can either switch to everything being the nominal C3, or you can assign a range. So let's say the minimum, I don't want to go too crazy with this, so maybe the minimum is like a D, and then we have an F, so a nice minor third. Let's randomize and see what that sounds like. We try another one. I like that more. Same other options, lock, reset. We go to flam, and here maybe we can try something different. We can add a different snare maybe on this one. Let's see what we have. Instead of this original kick, we have snares here. Maybe this broken snare. I'm gonna replace this here. And then I'm gonna go back to flam, and I'm probably gonna randomize the top one. So in that case, I'll probably go back to steps, add a main hit there, go back to flam, go to the second one, and again, let's say I only want to apply this to like 2, and I either have the option of going for fixed, so all of them are at 30, or more of a range, so let's say between 20 and 70, just random. Since I only selected 2 and it has 16 slots, it might take a while, so let's put 8 in and help it out a bit. And I like the way this sounded at whatever it was, almost 40. And then same buttons, lock and reset. For the volume, exactly the same thing. You can, let's switch to hi-hat. You can either just have everything at the nominal 100 or whatever you select here, or you can just make it a bit more interesting. So let's say the maximum, I don't want to just go full on. And let's say we have it between 98 and 115. Let's randomize this. You have a bit of variation. So let's put this in solo and see what we did. And you actually see in the mixer there on the hi-hat. The VU is wobbling following that volume. And then pan, exactly the same. You can either stick to everything being in the center, or you can have a value. In the center, it's a bit boring, and let's try something like maybe maximum of 12, 13 on each side, and let's randomize that. And that sounds pretty cool if you ask me. So another cool feature of this big button here is this right hand, so to speak. If you click on it, it's gonna add a bit of a variation. It's gonna change the pattern only while you're holding it. Now it's playing around with the hi-hat, but if I click on all, and the instance you take the mouse off, it goes back to the original. And this is something quite interesting that you can use on its own, or you can use as part of the remix pads. And what this function does here with this button is has an algorithm where it takes your original beat and then creates variations of that depending on a lot of randomization. So if you click here, this is going to be your first beat, and then whatever you click here is going to be a variation on that. And it's going to be quite interesting to manipulate these and switch from one to the other and see what you can get. There's a lot of systematic chaos involved in this type of exercise. So let's see what the algorithm did for this one. I'm really digging this last one. Obviously, some sound better than others, and you can always refill the pads and clear it if this is not something that you want to do. Then this in a way works in conjunction with this button here. So this actually adds variation whenever you click on it, and it doesn't go back like when pressing on this one. So when I click on this, it goes to a variation, but it always comes back. Here, it doesn't. And in the remix pads menu to your right hand side, you have sample trigger. So these are all of the samples that I'm using in the beat. And if you have a MIDI pad, you can play these in a different way. So PLAYBEAT isn't only a drum machine, it's also a sample player in that sense, which is quite cool. And then the final two, let's call them performance elements of the interface, are these two buttons here, the dissolve and the infinity button. So these work in conjunction. You can have PLAYBEAT dissolve the beat, so get rid of everything every cycle until the loop is completed. So in this case, it's 4 cycles. So at the end of those 4 cycles, there's going to be nothing left. So let's have a listen to that. That's quite nifty. You can go back. You can also use this infinity loop on its own. And the easiest way to show you that is literally to just put a 4 on the floor and put it on, let's say 2. And once every 2 cycles, it's going to change the pattern of the kick drum. So quite a nifty little feature there. And now one of the other randomizing factors that I didn't cover so far is this button here that changes the sample itself, just randomly picks one. So that can also be quite interesting. Then in between these two buttons, we have the export menu. So you can export stems, individual elements, or entire beat, which is quite cool, as well as MIDI. So if you really like some patterns and you want to use a different sampler to trigger them, you can export from here either individual MIDI stems or all the stems, or you can also export as an audio file or as a MIDI file, which is quite useful. And this actually leads me to this side of things. So obviously on the right, you have the MIDI CC mapping. So that's all good fun. If you have a MIDI controller and you want to add one of these to your controllers, then you have these different options for MIDI output, and the most important ones are here. So for instance, if you want to use this but then trigger a different sampler, let's say in Ableton, you have to put these on, and then depending on what MIDI notes you have on your drum trigger, you'll get this individual channel going to that one specifically. Otherwise it's going to all go to the same one and it's not going to know how to separate them. You do have a panic button in case it starts looping on itself. And here, if you have an external MIDI device, you can assign it here. And here, this is also quite nifty. Using these will mean that if you generate a pattern, it's not going to be in the same step here. So let's say we do something like this and then we randomize. As you can see, it's avoiding putting them on the same as these two hits there. So that can come in handy as well. So it's a good feature. But for instance, if you're working in Reaper like I am, the way to actually select multi-output, MIDI multi-output is a bit different. So what you have to do is go here to the in-out section of, in this case, the track that I have PLAYBEAT on. I have to select track channels, so how many channels, and then select what the output of PLAYBEAT in this case is, and then what the input of the other channel is. So for instance, I made these ones. This is a kick and this is a snare. And as you can see, they work separately. So this is another option if you don't want to use the sort of Ableton drum rack or something similar on Reaper as a third-party plugin. You can use this to trigger individual tracks. So here you might put whatever sample you like as a kick if you don't like the PLAYBEAT one, or if you want these to work in conjunction, you can do that. And make sure that you have multiple track channels so it accounts for the multiple outputs on PLAYBEAT. Okay, so before talking about the preset manager, I want to talk a bit about the sample manager. So if you click here on samples, or even if you click up here and then go to samples here, you can see all of the different samples, and you have some factory samples, and this will get updated, and you can literally just drag and drop here. You have solo, mute, randomize, so it kind of cycles through them. You can lock it, and then you can also get rid of it. And then you also have user samples. You also have favorites. So assuming you really like these 3 kicks, you can go to favorites and now you'll have them there. Then this folder is your important samples, your exported loops if you choose to do so. And then you could also add your own samples. Let's say I go for this one, select folder, and then I'll have the samples here. And if, again, I favorite these, it's going to be here. So it's really easy to import your own samples. And then if you want, you can then select the channel, for instance, and then sample edit. So play around with the sample to easily manipulate it. And then, of course, you can change the pitch. You can do everything that you can do to the normal samples that PLAYBEAT comes with, but to your own sample, which is really, really cool. It's an amazing feature. So now that we talked about the samples, let's talk about the presets that you can do. First of all, you have these quick presets here, so you can click on these and then it kind of assigns different presets here, and you can say, I don't know, maybe I want preset pack number 1 to be on 1, on 2, or this one, I don't know, on 6. And then you go here and you have those presets assigned for quick access here. Obviously, you can still go here and go through them, but sometimes just to be more creative and faster, you might want to just have it just at the bottom of the interface here so you can easily try one out, see if you like it, and see what each of these does. And from the presets and packs here, so obviously PLAYBEAT comes with a selection initially, but they will update the various preset packs here. So for instance, you have PLAYBEAT Beta 1 pack here, which is the beta pack, and in all you have every preset and pack. So if you make your own or if you add additional ones, you'll have everything here. Factory presets, so this is the factory preset it comes with. Then user presets, favorites, again, if you like some of these, they'll show up here, so you can always go back to your favorites. In terms of packs, you can add whatever packs you want here, and as I said, this will get updated constantly. You can import your packs from here, which is quite cool, and you can of course browse more packs. It's going to send you to the website, and you can also create your own pack, and this is quite fun. You can make your own packs, upload them, sell them, whatever. So let's say you made your own samples and then you want to make a pack for PLAYBEAT, my first pack, and then description, and then you can select some artwork, and bam, your pack is done. So if I made a preset that I really like, I can just drag it here and then it's gonna show up here. And obviously you can rename this, and I can actually assign, and this is on all of the presets, not only the custom ones. You can assign some different labels for the different genres. So let's say it's hip hop, then maybe it's a bit of VDM, and I don't know, maybe even a bit of tribal. So you have that, it's gonna get saved as part of your preset pack, and you are done. So I just made a quick beat here. So I made that beat, I really like it. I'm gonna hit save. This is dope beat 2. I'm gonna click save. It saved it here, and then I can put it in my pack 2, and now I have both. So it's really easy to create your own custom packs. Then you see here all of the different samples. Of course, you can add your own sounds. You can create your own sounds, put them here, and just have a really cool custom pack. And what's also amazing about PLAYBEAT is that you can load sounds. So you loaded the sounds, but it's exactly the same pattern. So you maintain that same pattern, but you can actually try different sounds on top of it, which is really cool. And you could also do it the other way around. So let's say you really like the sound of that, but you might not like the pattern. There's obviously a lot of utility in that, because you can easily switch from one pattern to another or from one sound to another and see which one sticks. And that on top of the randomizing functions means that you can, as I said at the beginning, create almost infinite variations of your loops, which makes the entire process a whole lot more creative. Instead of just worrying about exactly what to do here, 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 and here, you can use this tool to just get you to a creative space quicker, and the end result will be something really unique and something that you probably wouldn't have reached by just trial and error. Overall, PLAYBEAT is an incredibly powerful tool. You might get a bit overwhelmed by the interface initially, but if you just spend 5 minutes with it, you'll see how useful it is and how much you can manipulate your beats. The fact that you can have a 3/4 beat, the fact that you can add your own samples, the fact that you have so many options in terms of the density of the notes, of the pitch of the notes, the volume, the panning. You can make some incredibly creative and unique beats by just pressing a few buttons.